I'm back.
Hey, I was here.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good
Good
morning.
morning.
Very good. Okay, we've got about 9 o'clock here, but I don't have a picture yet. I'll wait.
So Don, can we wait a minute? I want Brian to come back in. We are live streaming our
It's fine. Go ahead.
board meeting, and Brian is helping me.
Okay.
Kathy, I have a question. I guess a Brown Act question.
Can we ask that in the meeting?
Yes, we can.
Okay. When we do the agenda, approval of the agenda?
Okay, it was just a really simple question, but it might be better to have it in the minutes.
I agree. So just so you know, I'm going to start recording. We are also, this is so strange. I'm watching myself delayed by 10 minutes. I need to
Oh.
have that.
10 minutes?
10 seconds.
10 seconds, whatever it is. We are live streaming. We're practicing live streaming on YouTube for the board meetings. That way we can embed it on our website. And so if people can't zoom in, they can just watch it on our site, go to our site and watch it, and it's live streamed, but there's a delay from the time it's hitting here and then coming, and I can see myself, and it really distracts me. Distracts me because I'm looking at you guys as well. And so Brian just shared the link. I think if you go there, you can actually see our live streaming, video.
I don't think I need any other distractions.
So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually send this link to Casey. He might he was on the last call, and he might be having difficulty finding it. So let me just send that to him real quick. Oh, he got it.
Hola.
That is him.
Hey, ¿qué pasa?
De nada.
Ciao.
I'm just extending my Spanish good knowledge.
Okay, I think I'm recording, and I am taking minutes for today's meeting. So Don, whenever you want to take it away, we're ready to go.
Okay, sounds good. Welcome everybody. We're opening now the annual board retreat, revised edition. It looks like it's about 9:04 to me, and so I'm going to call the meeting to order. How about a roll call?
Okay, Nick Chernoff,
Here.
Juliana Fariani,
Here?
Casey Littleton,
Yes, ma'am.
Don Raleigh,
Here.
Cindy Simonson,
Here.
Rose Bingo,
Here.
Judith Meyer.
Here.
Everyone is here.
Okay, we're supposed to have a Pledge of Allegiance. Ian, would you like to do that?
Ian.
Ian?
Ian's gone.
Ian's gone. Do you
Oh,
mean
he's not here?
Yeah.
Okay, we can always, okay, let's do this. How about Rose?
Rose? Thank you.
I pledge allegiance
To
To
the
The flag of the United States of America
and
and to the republic
for
for which it stands,
one nation.
one nation,
God.
under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, thank you. Kathy, go ahead with your public comment.
Okay.
or you want me to read it? It's up
Oh,
to you.
no, it's fine. The public may address the board on any matter pertaining to the county superintendent's office that's not on the agenda. The board reserves the right to limit the time of individual presentations and the cumulative time of all presentations. These proceedings are being recorded. The recording will be kept for 6 months, and comments were able to be emailed to me prior to the board meeting, and I have no public comment to report.
Okay, thank you. Item 1, then, the board retreat. We're going to go to 5 here. Board retreat. We're going to discuss 3 topics, and the first one is the discussion will take place regarding school planning for county-operated programs and for districts in Tuolumne County, and that's probably our biggest issue today.
And I apologize, Juliana. I thought we had an approval of the agenda on this one, but we don't usually on the retreat. But I'll speak to why we resubmitted the agenda within the time frame allowed. This is a regularly scheduled board meeting, so you have to post them 72 hours ahead of time. And so when we posted the board retreat agenda last week, we used simply the same language that we had used multi-years prior. We've used that prior. And it was brought to our attention that it was somewhat vague. And there's another little piece. We went to the online agenda format. And when you post them online, if you don't, for example, do you see how I listed these out? If you look online, I listed them out as item 1, 2, and 3 and gave the description of each one. You don't have to necessarily expand each item to see what it is. There has been some question about because you have to click that it's actually hiding the agenda item, or that you have to go into the agenda to see the description of the agenda item, and therefore it's not transparent. So it's simply a matter of reposting it so that it's bulleted and very visible, so that we can make sure we're transparent about how we're showing our items on our agenda. So that's why in this particular case, the agenda was reposted, and instead of having it under the description of what the item is, now embedded in the title of what the agenda item is. And the same thing happened on our closed session item. It simply said closed session, and you had to click on it and expand it so it had the safe harbor provision of why we were doing a closed session item. And you have to have what's called safe harbor language. There are limited reasons why a board can do a closed session item. And so we have to be very explicit about it, but you had to click on it to see what that safe harbor language was. And so that was brought up as that. And so I can't figure out necessarily what the issue is. Teasing it out, I think that's what the issue is. I have not received feedback when I've asked if that's what the issue is. So I'm kind of taking a shot, not necessarily in the dark, but I'm taking a shot on, well, what's different from our previous meeting postings before we went to this online version to now, and that's what I came up with as.
So Kathy, quick question for you on this. Are we striking these items, or just 1 or 2, or what's going on here? Explain that to me.
No, we're keeping all the items that are there. It was just how it was initially posted. If you looked at the original board meeting posting,
Yeah, I saw that.
It says amended or revised. It was it just had, we'll meet to discuss the following topics, and it had it in it just had board retreat, and then you had to click on it to get to the description of what it was. Mm-hmm. This one, we actually took that off and just spelled it out as a separate bullet of what each of the items were.
Yeah, for these items that need to have an advance notice of what, 24 hours or more?
Has to have 72 hours for a regular board meeting.
72, I'm sorry, that's correct.
24 for a special, yeah.
Okay, So this is regarded as a special, and it's 24, and it's been up 24, is that right?
No, this was redone last week within the 72 hours prior to the 72 hours. But if you post a board meeting agenda and you make changes to it, you have to post a revised board agenda.
Okay. So I'm going to carry on then in order.
Wait, I just have a question about the process for these Zoom meetings.
Yeah, we have that as number 3, if you want to.
Well, I just wanted to make sure. No, it just has to do with the process of not that part. So when we go in and out of closing our screen, is that acceptable per Brown Act that we can close and have the black screen?
You should have your screen up. There could be reasons why you don't have it up, and it could be that you're calling in and you only have sound and you don't have video. And so that's what I wanted to talk about on item 3.
Okay, I just thought, okay, I just was thinking because we were going to have the meeting that we could do that, but that's okay. All right.
So it is recommended, especially right now, that we are all visible if possible, if we have that function on how we're coming into the board meeting.
Okay. But if one of us needs to do something, we just black out our screen and we can leave, and that's perfectly acceptable.
You shouldn't leave the meeting. No, because you shouldn't leave the meeting. You mean like leave the room?
No. Just
like right there. I muted my video.
Yes.
Well, let's talk about that more in the
Okay.
Okay. And we can set our norms at that. You
Okay.
can set your norms. Okay.
Okay. That sounds
Okay, I'm
fine.
going to walk through this then, starting item 1, and just a discussion with folks here. I have a suggestion on some of this stuff because of the way we're doing things, and it kind of relates to item 3. I suggest that all actions require a roll call vote, all actions. Okay, and also comments from the board would be done in a roll call order as being called. So like say, Nick, do you have any comments? And then just go on to Juliana, so on, so on, so on. Comment? It would be cleaner that way. That's what I'm thinking.
Well, we don't have any action items today. These are all discussion items.
Okay. Okay, but just a discussion. Okay.
Yeah, all 3 of these are discussions, and there are no attachments.
Okay, let's go in order then. Discussion will take place regarding the return to school funding for county operated programs and for districts in Tuolumne County.
So if you recall, we did not want to have a long annual retreat, but these were 3 items that we felt might need to be addressed in July. And so this is our July meeting, and this is to talk about the structure of your programs, but also what's going to happen throughout districts in regards to schools starting in Tuolumne County. So I'll start with, we had a town hall meeting. Some of you were on. I actually answered, I think, some of your questions. I tried without deleting you. Over 100 pre-questions submitted before the town hall, and we had over 100 questions submitted after. And so I'm working my way through those questions and trying to answer as many of them as I can in an FAQ. Some of the questions are specific to school districts, and those are being sent out to school districts. And from that town hall, I've received a handful of phone calls that I've talked with individuals about a variety of things, and a few emails that I've been working my way through as well. If they are questions that are, again, specific to school districts, I usually refer them back to their school districts. If it's a question about special education in general, I'll answer the question in general and then refer them back to their school district. But some of them are just general questions about masks and things like that. So 3 of the themes that we saw emerge in the town hall. Maybe I should address my next item first. The reality is our community is experiencing what we call probably community transmission, and we're trying to stop that status from being full-on community transmission. We're still trying to be in a stage where we can attempt to do contact tracing. Why that's important is if you have community transmission, you are working under the assumption that everybody has or has been exposed to the virus and is a potential carrier. That drastically affects our ability to develop return to school plans. Think of it this way. You're telling teachers and children and parents to send their children back to school when the State Board of Education isn't meeting in person, when the California Department of Education is completely shut down and everybody is meeting from home, and almost all of Sacramento legislative staff has been sent home for 2 weeks. And yet you're saying in the same breath, teachers and students and parents, you need to get your kids back into school. It just doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense in regards to the science and the way viruses transmit. So we're dealing with this dichotomy of, we know that there is a virus out there. We know that it disproportionately affects people over 50. We do know that 30%, and in our case a little more than 30%, of our teaching population or instructional staff, our school staff, are over the age of 50 or in vulnerable populations. And yet we're trying to develop 3 distinct plans for return to school. And then I'm going to go back to the first theme that emerged. The first thing that emerged was many of the parents do not want to send their kids to school if there is a requirement to mask. Some parents even express that they won't send their kids to school if staff are wearing masks because they feel that it's frightening for their children.
Seriously.
So I want to go back to the first thing that I said, which is we know we're right at the point of community transmission. We know our numbers are increasing. There are people sitting in our hospital, even though they're not on the list, because they're not Tuolumne County folks. They are folks from around in our region that are at our hospital that are positive for COVID. And they are very, very sick people. And again, just keeping in mind what's happening at the state level, our legislative branch is shut down, CDE is not meeting in person, State Board of Education is not meeting in person. And so that is a big concern for not just our teachers, but our school staff in general, and it should be for administrators as well. So when we look at students pulling out of school, it's not the 2-day-a-week model that's most determining that pulling out. It's they refuse to mask at all. And so they are looking, parents are looking to pull out students and put them on an independent study model or enroll them in a charter school that offers a homeschool model. Most schools are looking at what we call a cohort. And the reason they do a cohort is because we don't have the space to expand, to space out students enough from staff in order to meet the guidelines from the CDC. The CDC has come out and said, no, we aren't changing those guidelines. And the CDC guidelines do not dictate local public health and state public health guidelines. So even if the CDC came out and said it doesn't have to be 6 feet, the likelihood of the state of California coming out with different guidelines saying than what they have already come out with is very unlikely. The cohort allows for schools to have fewer students in a classroom at one time, thereby being able to more likely successfully social distance. Not just physical distancing in the classroom, but also when they're out at recess, because nobody wants to keep kids inside all day. So recess time, lunch time. The cohort model is used a lot in other countries successfully, but that's used in combination with very strict community safety guidelines, except for the UK. The UK is totally different. The UK's, they're no longer part of the the EU anyway, but most other countries are practicing community-wide safety precautions as well as their school precautions, and they tend to cohort week on, week off with their kids who are staying home a week, working basically on independent study, and they're working on work. And then when they're there, they're working on whatever they're working on in school. In this case, the idea is to cohort and have one group of students coming part of the week, having a day in between for cleaning, and then having the other cohort come the second part of the week. And then you have the weekend for cleaning. And so you've got cleaning in between. The concern is teachers moving around, especially in the middle and high school model. Teachers would move to the groups of students, and so are you carrying that with you? The concern is about substitute teachers. If you have substitute teachers at different schools, how are they? Are they going to become carriers? The other concern is, what was the other concern that I had? And the other concern is, what do students do when they're home, and how do they have access to learning? That resulted in the third big topic, which is daycare. Schools are not daycare centers, but we do know that many of our parents are working parents, and they rely upon the structure of school, and they have built their lives and their financial survival around the ability to have students in school so that they can access work. And we also know that with limited daycare, the options for them to send kids into daycare are very limited. So by not having kids in school, are they inadvertently sending kids to a neighbor's house where kids now are cohorting together from different schools and different locations, and thereby increasing the spread? We do know that student to student or child to child transmission is lower. It seems lower. They haven't done enough research on it, but it seems lower than an adult to adult transmission, but it does not mean that there is no transmission. It just means that it's lower. We do know children are affected by COVID, and they have tested positive. Most likely they are asymptomatic, but those who are not asymptomatic can have potentially fatal outcomes, and that's the Kawasaki syndrome, or the syndrome that's related, multi-system failure, inflammation that happens that they may recover from. We do know that while most people are not who have COVID are asymptomatic or have mild symptoms, we do know that even those with mild symptoms and with severe symptoms don't just all of a sudden recover. So even though they may have tested negative and technically are not active with the virus, we know that the fallout of being exposed to it, some of them have very long-term outcomes. Reduced lung function. We look at some issues around brain damage that they're looking at now, because it is an inflammation of blood vessels. So with that, we're developing 3 scenarios. Scenario 1 is, which we've kind of just said, the likelihood is it's going away every day, which is coming back to school. Everyone comes back on August 18th, and we clean really well. We might have some people who have masks, but we're all good to go. The likelihood of that is pretty much off the table. The second one is the cohorting model, which is trying to get some kids back into school, because we know that some kids need to be in school. And I'll talk specifically about our county programs in a second. And then the third model is a total distance learning model. San Jose Unified has said that they are starting the school year with a distance learning model. LA Unified, I don't know if they've done their official announcement yet, but it's likely that they will. And more school districts in these really hard-hit areas are indicating they will start with a distance learning model. New York City has indicated they are going to start because their numbers are low. The governor and the mayor are fighting. We'll see how that one works out. For our county-operated programs, we have the difficulty of many of our children do not respond well to distance learning, whether it's done virtually or if it's done in packets. A lot of their needs are around social, emotional type of supports. And so even if we go into a distance learning, we'll have to do it something different than what we've done in the spring, even though I think that we geared up very nicely in the spring. Nobody should pretend that that was a full distance learning homeschool model. That if they are, they're deluding themselves. It was pretty exceptional what we did and what we were able to offer in the short period of time. So we have the potential to offer something that's really amazing, but it is going to require some in-person support for our students. And that's what we're working on right now, is what does that model look like? Everything from my psychologist doing assessments on students for special education to the delivery of speech, OT, all those other services. How can we do that in a safe manner? We also have working its way at the state level. I don't know if you've read the letter from CTA that came out. The American, I think it's American Pediatric Association, had their letter saying kids need to be in school. They also did a clarification letter that was followed up and said they did not want their letter politicized. And there's a caveat: we want kids in school if it's safe. So don't use us as political fodder on this. And in fact, they signed on with NEA at the national level to say that kids should not be in school if there is community transmission going on. So we'll see how the state level works in regards to our labor partners, and the ability to return may be taken off the table. I have a meeting today at whatever time it was. I think it was 11. We were theoretically, it was an interesting request. It's at 11. And the State Superintendent of Public Instruction, Tony Thurmond, he wanted to meet with county superintendents and county public health officials in a in what was called a regional grouping, right? And so Liza says, I don't know who our region is because we already have a region. We already have the Yosemite Gateway Partnership. And so that's Merced, Madera, Stanislaus, Mariposa, Tuolumne, Calaveras. They meet regionally. So when I saw the invitation, it says Zoom meeting with Central County Health Officers, and I see some of the folks that are on that call. I see, for example, SJCOE, I see Solano County, I see Alameda, and I see Santa Clara. I'm thinking, we aren't Santa Clara and we're not Alameda. I can understand Alpine, but Santa Barbara, San Bernardino.
No way.
This county has a lot alike.
And the goal of the meeting was to connect county superintendents with their county public health officers, which I thought was interesting as well, because there are some weeks when I talk more to Liza than I do to my own husband. So we know what that meeting is, but what I'm going to be saying is what I'm hearing from teachers and staff, and from they are concerned about their own health. They do not want to be used as guinea pigs in this. They do not want to be used as sacrificial lambs. And they are simply not providing the funding that is needed to make schools safe. I still don't have the PPE that's needed to start school, even if people did wear masks. And we do have some teachers that are refusing to mask, that have met with students without masking them or their students. They believe that this is all a hoax. I refuse to start school with hand sanitizer that smells like tequila, and that's not going to happen. And the amount of work that we're asking teachers to do, even in a hybrid model, is tremendous. So what we're asking them to do is to take care of parents and students at home, and take care of students at school, and be mindful not to let them mix, because if you do, you're potentially killing a child or yourself. That's how serious it is, guys. So I don't mean to speak in hyperbole, but I think everyone should be aware of what we're asking teachers to do yet again. We've asked them to throw themselves in front of active shooters, right? Okay, active shooters, let's go ahead and train teachers to try and save their kids in an active shooter drill. Our kids have mental health issues. Okay, let's give them just barely enough training, not hardly any training, and make them provide mental health services to children and their families. Oh, homeless children? Oh, okay, so now you've got to identify homeless children and make sure they have resources. And by the way, the same thing with foster youth. We're not gonna give you quite enough to be able to do that. We're gonna give you just enough to kind of do something, but not enough to actually make an impact. What we put on teachers and staff members at this point, what we're asking them to do, I think is just over the top ridiculous. So one of the superintendents said, can I meet with you and talk with you about what you're truly feeling about all of this? And I said, oh, you want to meet with me and hear about what I truly feel? I feel that what we're asking teachers to do is just absolutely ridiculous. Because honestly, I'm not in the classroom every day with kids. I'm sitting here in my own office with my door shut. And if I go out, I mask and I have limited number of people in I'm feeling pretty good. I couldn't imagine walking into a classroom with even 10 kids, knowing that what our community does in regards to how they conduct themselves outside of their bubbles, they're bringing their bubbles into those teachers. That's the reality of it. And the teachers know what's going on out in the community. They know there are gatherings. They know there are people not taking precautions. And in this case, it's not just not wearing your seatbelt, right? Not wearing that safety device and you end up getting hurt. It's now they're getting hurt, or they take it home to their families or to their babies or to their grandparents. And that's how that happens. So that's what's going on in regards to the return to school. And if someone says to me, what's the answer? I'm going to say we don't have the answer right now. We're working the best way we can. We're planning our spaces to be spaced out. I'm focusing really on county school programs because those kids, we have to do something in person and it has to be safe. And so I'm working on that with 26 school sites. I have a parent meeting scheduled for this Thursday. I have parents reaching out to me. Some of them are just saying, I'm not sending my kid to school at all. So we're developing alongside that. How are we going to do this distance-wise, and how are we going to make sure some in-person services get delivered to some of our kids? Like, for example, I have transition students who are turning 22 this year. How can I give them the life skills to be able to successfully move on and transition into, for example, watch programs? And as far as I know, I think watch is still not open either. So what are we going to do to support those adults? What am I going to do to support preschoolers? I have a structured preschool student who lives right next door to me, and I can see the result of having a lack of services. I've watched it over the last 3 or 4 months. That child needs some support, and the parents can only do so much. So I need to get my structured preschool kids into some kind of in-person support, keeping my staff safe. And the other piece is the teachers are asking for some unification around what does distance learning look like so that they can rely upon each other to help them through this hard part. Because they know if they're doing some kind of in-person instruction, the time that they have to deliver instruction outside of that time is going to be limited. The state has provided us some provisions. School only has to be in session for 4 hours a day. The instructional minutes were decreased, your minimums. And our school year was reduced to 175, like back in the 2000s, if you remember, we had 175 days. So I don't think any district has talked about that. We'll talk about it this week. And hopefully we can make some critical decisions about how we're going to support our kids. But as I've said, as our community goes, so we go. And I think I shared with you the ArcGIS predictive model that was developed by the state, by OES. You can go in and look at the 2-week prediction. Right when school starts is supposed to be our peak in terms of numbers of cases and numbers of deaths. And no district wants to be the district that says I've had the first teacher die or I've had the first student die. It's not worth it. It really isn't. So that's the, I know this is a discussion, so I just wanted to give you a report on that, and we can start discussing and ask questions.
Question.
Okay.
You didn't really mention a question on that. What about international exchange students? Do we have any slated that were supposed to come in? And
We had some slated to come in, and in fact, one parent reached out to me who is a host, and that is a local decision made by the high schools. And it's not that they don't think that they're valuable. It's probably if they're not having them, which it sounds like they're not, it's because they're having to divert their resources and their limited staff to do this as opposed to work with international students.
it makes sense. I just want to know, as news is flashing about the lawsuit in California today, I don't know if we were impacted by that. Thank you.
Any further discussion from
Yeah.
the other board members,
I
please?
have 2 questions, Don, Juliana, 2 questions. Kathy, so does it really look like when I have parents or I have teachers or whatever, whomever, does it really look like it's going to be distance learning to start school? I know it's going day by day, but if you could predict, would you assume that it was going to be distance learning?
I would say right now I feel like it's a 50-50. And if we keep going in the trend, that will change probably by 1% every day. 51-49, 52. You know, that's where I'm feeling. I'll know more, and it could actually be taken out of our hands. If the CTA, where I see they're going with their arguments, that might just be completely taken out of our hands.
Okay, and then my second question is, so we're going to do the distance learning. There'll be probably some independent study programs in the schools, just district schools, because this is going to a county question. Do you anticipate, or should we have a discussion about interdistrict transfers and parents who are going to look at one distance learning model at a school, or I'm thinking even a special ed program, that we may have a lot of interdistrict transfers?
So a couple things around that. The district should be offering independent study, and I had a parent reach out to me talking about one district, and the district says no independent study, you have to come to school. So they were talking to me about enrolling in a charter school, and doing an interdistrict transfer, and I explained to her, you don't require an interdistrict transfer on a charter school, period. You just go and enroll, and if they have room. So, but I wanted to know the rationale behind the independent study, and it was a student with a disability. But districts need to meet and to discuss. That's why it's an individualized education plan and not like a group education plan. Because as an individualized education plan, you have to discuss why would that student be successful in independent study, or why wouldn't they? You can't unilaterally just say no to a program. So parents have a right to ask for an IEP meeting to discuss the placement of their child, especially if they're going to do anything that's out of the ordinary. For example, requiring masks, because that will affect certain students in certain ways. You have a child with autism, that's going to affect their ability to mask and be able to access education, so you need to discuss it as an IEP team meeting. I'm encouraging all districts to, and some of them have, a lot of them have looked at their independent study program policies to see, do we have something in place that's pretty robust? They do not have to offer an independent study program that's simply the let's assign work and we meet once a week. That's urban legend. I have been operating an independent study program for years that's based more on a homeschool type of model for some kids who simply can't be at school for whatever reason. Some of them meet once a week for an hour and they're just fine. Some kids meet twice a week for a few hours because they need that. So everybody has a different way. My independent study program is written in a way that flexibility has been afforded to us, and I have hired great teachers that can maneuver between in-school instruction and that kind of instruction that happens out of the classroom. Distance learning is a little different because distance learning is the idea that you're there in class for part of the time, at least in this particular hybrid model. You're there for part of the time, and when you go home, the teacher isn't available to support you. You're going to be working on your own on something else because the teacher is now over here teaching this other cohort that hasn't been in school. So that's the part that they're all grappling with. That's where we need to find some commonality about what does that look like. So no, technically it's not independent study. Those rules haven't relaxed. You have to offer independent study for 5 days a week. So that's why you call it distance learning, because it can't be independent study. But some parents just want to be on independent study. I had one family reach out to me. I don't want to send my kids 2 days a week to this one school because the grandparents are going to be taking, we have people who can take care of my kid, and it's a grandparent, you know, and that's going to work out really well. But I can't have this grandparent exposed to my kid who's now exposed 2 days a week to everybody else in their school. So we just want to put them on independent study. So I encourage them to reach out to their district. Districts need to meet parents where they are, where they need to be. That's what we got to do. We got to be flexible. You got to meet them. I mean, they're scared. Some of them are scared because they don't want to send their kids to school. Some of them are scared because the child care provider that they're going to use isn't going to be able to take their kid if they have to be in school 2 days a week. Some parents are scared because they know their child isn't going to wear a mask, has been trying to get their kid to wear a mask, and they know that their kid is going to end up flipping the table upside down because it's so frustrating for them. So how does that do anybody any good? I can be rigid, I can be a jellyfish, or I can be a backbone, right? So don't be a brick wall, don't be a jellyfish, be a backbone. Be flexible, do your yoga, you're gonna be really flexible, and that's the guidance I'm giving to districts. We're willing to work with them. Some just, they're very independent, they wanna do their own thing, and that's fine. It would be much easier for all of us to be coordinated in what we do.
I know I've had several parents reach out to me who are afraid to send their children to school and are talking about homeschooling. And so what I said, that's a decision you have to make. Know that there are some rules around homeschooling. You have to register with the state. What do you mean I have to register with the state? I said that's part of the rules. You have to register with the state. There are guidelines you have to follow. What I told him, I said, what I think you should do first is meet with your school. And if you are that adamant about them not attending school because of the masks or whatever, then check out the independent study portion so that at least your children are using the same curriculum and are at the same pace and at the same place as children their own age in your school district. So does that sound?
That's exactly what I've been saying. And as things change, it would be much easier for them to slip back into personal instruction than not. They have a relationship with that teacher. Now, where it gets a little sticky is some of our districts, there's one in particular that's not offering independent study, and you might get inter-district transfer requests from that. So even if the districts all agree we're not going to honor inter-district transfer requests for that particular reason, I reminded them the final word on inter-district transfer requests actually lies with the county board. And so let me tell you what the county board looks for. They look for due process, and they look for an appeal process. So do you have an appeal process in your inter-district transfer request policy? Because if you don't have an appeal process, if the decision lies with one person, they do not look favorably upon that. So just telling you, just through it with them. I can tell you what they're going to ask. They're going to ask, what's your appeal process at your district level? And if you say we don't have one, the decision rests with the superintendent. I said, remember, they have a lot of latitude in the decisions they make around inter-district transfer requests. I always say this over and over. Cindy heard me say that. They're very independent, very intelligent. They do their research. This board knows what they're doing. So they don't, you know, I mentioned that in regards to the charter school twice before that they went against the staff recommendations. So They know what they're doing. They will make a decision based on what research they have. They're not led by their nose. And so I told that to the superintendent. So regardless of what they come up with, they know that we might be getting a lot of inter-district transfer requests.
Okay.
So Kathy,
Yeah.
can I just ask a question for clarification? It's around masks and I hate to beat a dead horse. So I've had a couple of people ask me, what happens if a student refuses to wear a mask? Are they not allowed to go to school? I did hear you say on the conference call that it's not going to be approached punitively, which, you know, is appreciated. But what does happen?
Well, just like businesses, we'll do education, right? You know, how to wear a mask. But let's say it's somebody who's sending their kids to school and saying they're just not going to wear a mask, and they absolutely refuse. Think of it like measles vaccination. If you're in the middle of a pandemic, if you're in the middle of a measles outbreak, do we allow kids to come to school with measles without immunizations during a measles outbreak? No.
Okay.
That's what it'll come down to. We hope it won't get to there. It has nothing to do about freedom or anything. It's just think of it like measles. Think about it like bacterial meningitis. If we have an outbreak of bacterial meningitis, what do? We shut the school down and we clean the whole thing up. And we test everybody who came into contact with that person. Because it's not just they might recover, most likely they will, but there are quite a few people, especially young people, that die from bacterial meningitis. Same thing with measles, mumps, all of those things. So it's the same thing. We're in the middle of a public health crisis. The public health officer has a right to make those decisions. Now, as for the masking order, which is interesting, people say, well, that's from California Department of Public Health. And so I had to wrap my brain around some of this because I asked not just our public health officer, I asked state as well. So back when Governor Newsom did the original executive order, people don't remember, the legislature gave him basically carte blanche power. He has the authority of the legislative branch. They gave him that during this pandemic. They have not removed that. So when he initiated his executive order back in March, in it says you have to follow the guidance of the California Department of Public Health. Period. That's what you have to do. So he does not feel he needs to issue another executive order about masking because it's already handled in the previous one. And scholar after legal expert says not only would he win, it would be humiliating for anybody to come against him about the masking order because it would be a complete trouncing in a legal arena. He has the authority to do that. And we sit under the more restrictive of the two. So our county public health officer can be more restrictive, but they can't be less restrictive. So the state has a masking order. We have to comply.
Mm-hmm.
We just don't have people going around like the masking police or anything like that. So, but they can do it through regulatory power, and our county is going to start doing that through regulatory power. Which means they pull your liquor licenses, your operating licenses. That's how they do that, or fine. But they're trying to do it in an education.
Don, this is Judy. I had a question for Kathy. Kathy, you mentioned earlier that districts and teachers are still grappling with distance learning. And we know the reality is that many of our parents, as they go back to work, do depend on schools for childcare. Can you tell me how the accountability has happened in the last few months of the school year we just finished with distance learning? And how you would expect it to happen as we start school again, with parents maybe not being there, with parents who are there and who are less attentive. How does that happen?
So in the spring, we were in a triage mode. And so because we did not prepare, no district and like across the nation prepared parents or students to enter into a distance learning. We just didn't have the time, we didn't have the resources. So it was a little bit of a triage. So the approach was do no harm, right? Let's not harm the kids who are doing well. Let's only help them if they can do better. And we hope that parents will help encourage students, their children, to continue with whatever learning we're giving them so that they continue on track. Luckily, it happened toward the end of the year. as we get into testing mode and we get into field trip season. So there was some loss of learning, but not as tremendous as folks are thinking. Where it makes a difference is when we start to gear up for the fall, there is an accountability piece to it. In fact, for us to use a distance learning hybrid model, there are all these requirements that the state is making us adhere to. Check-ins with students, we have to document that they're actually doing their work. We have to document that we have made this many contacts. So there is an accountability, and there will be grades assigned to that. All of a sudden, the motivation for students goes up quite a bit. I know even the most motivated student, when they found out that this didn't count or it didn't help their A grade get any more, I know hey, you know, I probably would have done the same. But now there's an accountability piece to that. Now, how we can help parents is, I have to be frank, we can only help them so much. So I'm meeting with Tracy Riggs on Thursday. I am looking at using their rec centers, which are not open, as you know. All of their rec centers are closed. A lot of their library satellite offices are closed as well. And the main library is closed, even though they're still checking out books. They're doing a hybrid model for that. So I'm going to talk with Tracy and ask her, is there some way that through my work with ISIS, Infant Child Enrichment Services, my office, and using those facilities, we can offer cohorted I don't want to say child care, but like instructional centers for essential workers. To help them, I have a lot of people that work at the hospital, for example, to help them access, be able to come to a place where they know they have internet access, they can do learning. It might be in a few hours at a time, but that would be the best that we can do. It's going to be a struggle for families. That's why we don't want to do it. That's, you know, no one wants to do this. We know our economy, you know, and that's a whole other discussion. That makes me sad that both parents have to work, or if they're a single family, single parent household, that we don't have a safety net in this case, and that's a bigger societal problem that's very concerning to me. But we have to remember first, schools are schools. Schools are educational centers, and while we do recognize we provide childcare, we know that we can't be the fix for everything childcare related. So it's a small piece of it. It's not going to solve everybody's issue around childcare. And everyone else needs to remember, until December of this year, any of our staff, any parent can take a leave and get paid 2/3 of what their salary is.
Have they talked about maybe pushing back start date after Labor Day as a part of the built-in protections?
Well,
State.
we would have to still go longer. And to be honest, starting back later in September probably doesn't afford us much relief, because as we get into October, we get into flu season. Right. And that's where as we start to be more indoors, and that's where the flu starts. And immunization isn't going to be the key either, because we still have, as we know, we're probably one of the lowest counties in regards to measles immunization rate. Juliana knows, she sits on the immunization task force. We're pretty low in kindergarten immunization rates. High school, I don't even want to get into high school immunization rates. They're dismal. And so because there is a lawsuit that happened that even though the state can deny admission in a pandemic, so those kids would be denied access to education unless they had a immunized. They could if we're in the middle of an active pandemic. However, the likelihood of a child vaccination being developed is not as high as everyone thinks. When we're talking about children, that takes a higher level of testing. The adults might be able to be vaccinated, but again, now you're starting to get into requirements for, you know, it gets that's not going to be the solving factor, the immunizations either.
Yeah,
Kathy?
oh, go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Question for you. So when you do come to a realization of what you have to do as far as starting school and all the rules that are implemented, are the districts going to have any kind of leeway, or will they have to follow those rules? Every district will have to follow those rules, even though maybe their district has available classrooms or whatever, that they can keep social distancing or whatever.
No, that's why there's flexibility about each district, because there are some little spots throughout our county, like Don Pedro High School. Don Pedro and Tioga High Schools have small populations of students and they have lots of classroom space. And so they can actually start up high school and practice social distancing, do the masking. They're gonna have to do the masking, that's a state order, sorry. They can do all of that stuff. So can, for example, Long Barn High, South Fork High, all of those little small necessaries out of Somerville High School District. Quain Hart might have enough space, and remember they were up to almost 800 students at one point. Of course, they had the other facility, but even then they're down to 250 or so, 270. They may be able to have enough space to socially distance, maybe not to staff with teachers, but they could staff with paraprofessional staff and administrators and whoever else. They could do it like a cohort A gets the teacher one day, or they have lots of options on how they want to they can implement it. So they don't have to follow what's going on with the majority of the school districts. That's why it's hard to say this is what the schedule is in a town hall meeting. These are the considerations we have. If we can't meet social distancing guidelines, this is what we have to do, guys, to be able to space them out. And so that was what was trying to come across. Because I know, for example, Twain Hart has this space. I was trying to think. Bellevue does not. Bellevue took in a lot of students on inter-district transfers last year, and they honored them this year from FLA. And so they actually had to convert one of their storage spaces into a classroom space. So for example, Bellevue does not have enough space to social distance. Somerville High, no. Sonora High, no.
Sonora doesn't have any room either.
Pardon?
Sonora L.
Sorrel doesn't. No, they've all maxed out. Twain Hart would be the only one because they went from 700 to half.
Couldn't we use the county fairgrounds?
It could be an option if they would give it to us.
For free. Kathy, I have a question. Are the private schools in our county being held to the same standards as our public schools?
Private schools are held to the same standard that schools are, but when you see the guidance, it's K-12, charter, and county office. And so when I say same standard, they have to follow masking rules, assembly rules, all of those different things as well.
Okay. Because I just want to be able to, when people ask me these questions, I've had a lot of parents asking me things like that. So
whatever, because like there's Mother Lode Christian and Waldorf that are operating in the county, and then we have Malaja that operates within city limits. They have to meet their permitting requirements as well.
Okay, thank you.
Public health is going to dictate this. Remember, we need to stay in our lane. Our lane is educators. And if public health says this is what you need to do, my internet Googling does not match an MD. So, and I'm not going to listen. What is it I heard? I'm not going to listen to the guy named Steve who barely passed high school biology versus public health. So, I mean, it really comes down to a lot of trust. And yeah, that's their job. Public health officers, their job are to look out for communicable diseases, to look at infectious diseases that affect the community. We went through this in 1918. It's almost like history. If you read what is it called? Chipsa? Is that how you say it? Chispa?
Chispa? I think so.
Chispa. They have a really great article on the Spanish flu of 1918. I mean, it just documents the whole thing. And it was like, is this from 2020? Because it's the same patterns of behavior that are happening again 100 years later. It's very interesting. Human behavior doesn't change, I don't think, over time.
And that's the Tuolumne County Historical Society. And you can actually go online to read that. And they would probably like for you to join. But they have a lot of excellent Tuolumne County history.
Yes,
really.
Billy helped me with, Billy Lyons helped me with all of the pictures that are in our hallway now that no one can see. And then Ron was made a moderator on Motherlode Memories, my husband, because, you know, big Ron, right? Old Ron, yeah.
Oh.
Older Ron. Yeah, he has a lot of the historical documents for Tuolumne County, and he was helping that historical society. And so my Ron inherited all of that knowledge. So it's like he knows everything. I'm like, how do you know that? Did the aliens put that in your head or something?
I did want to say one thing at the virtual, this is my last comment. At the virtual meeting, Ron Hamilton, for those of you who were not able to get on, Ron Hamilton, who's superintendent principal of Gold Rush Charter School, which is kind of a hybrid program, actually said to parents, you know, don't call us first. Check with your school district first for their independent study program. I thought that was very interesting because I think that Gold Rush Charter has pretty much reached their capacity.
Yeah.
Okay, I'd like to add something, if you don't mind. There's we're not going to really solve any of these things yet because it's a catch-22. They've handed down a decree that we've got to do these things, and they've given you a virtually impossible, pardon the word virtual here, but virtually impossible task. And the only way this is going to get solved in the long run is personal self-discipline. Do what you have to do. Make sure that you're looking at some of the data that's happening. And it should be very obvious to everyone, hey, we got to start doing things and have some perseverance to do the right thing. And it's really depressing to me that it isn't getting done. And I know it's bothering all of us here on this board. I don't know what to do right now. I was thinking originally that, well, you could do home and school, which we discussed already, and divide the class in maybe into two groups. And then I kept thinking, well, could you divide them into 4 groups and circulate them around the various classrooms and get the information for what they want what has to be done for the day, and then work on it, come back the next day with the work completed. I don't know. So I want to thank everybody for their input. And Kathy, my hat's off to you. The load that's been placed on you is unbelievable. Huge.
Well, I so far feel like I'm in good company in that, one, we're all in the same place, but it doesn't seem like it, but we're making incremental steps toward the reality. I hope that relationship with the superintendents maintains a positive relationship. I don't have any reason to think it won't, but I know that it's important for our school boards to understand the importance of our districts to work together in this. Yes, you're all, you're all your own district. You definitely are. You have your own governing board and you have your own cultures. But in this particular situation, it's so important that our teachers and our staff work together to come to solutions. Because we need to be that role model for our community. That whatever goes on in Twain Harte affects what happens in Groveland, affects what happens in Sonora. Because our kids don't stop at district boundaries. Our kids are Tuolumne County kids. They're regional kids. They hang down in Stanislaus and San Joaquin as well, in Calaveras. So if we can model a unified approach and one that supports each other in a very nurturing way, we'll get through it and we'll be better for it. We'll develop systems of support that will be tremendously valuable for small districts in rural areas. We're at a time right now where everyone's tired. You have to wear a mask half the time you go out, right? Anytime you go anywhere, and that's annoying. And we're cranky. And so people get mean. And I'll tell you, I've had some really mean, vicious things said to me and about me. And so I have 2 new kittens. I just hold them, and they remind me that I'm not such a bad person. And I think that's what we need to all find that support that is going to carry us through, because this is not going to end in September. It's going to be with us it's going to be the defining moment of our children's lives. 9/11 was for those kids who are now turning, late 20s, early 30s. That was their defining moment, even though that's so strange to think they're that old. And then for our children now, this is going to be their defining moment. So I hope that when they reflect back on this, think of the community that rallied around them and supported them and held them, and not show the divisiveness that's really heartbreaking to me right now. I think we need to show a lot more love for each other. And those are my thoughts for today.
Anyway, I'd like to say one more thing is that I think that we need to strive, and we all feel it, for the best result we can get, albeit not perfect, but let's make it as perfect as we can. And I think that's where we're going.
Kathy,
Okay.
what did you name your kittens?
Pardon?
What did you name your kittens?
One is Sirius, as in the character we love, which is Sirius Black, because he's very much like the mysterious Sirius Black. And then the other one is Sheldon Cooper Parker, because he's very, very much like Sheldon. We're very, very big fans of Big Bang Theory. But what was interesting was I actually went down to rescue a kitten underneath a dumpster that somebody had said, there's a kitten, I can't get it. And I saw his little face and I thought, I gotta help this guy get this kitten. I couldn't get the kitten. And then I got sad, so I went to PetSmart to pick up some other supplies for my other cat. I have a cat. And there they had kittens. And I'm like, oh, there's a bunch of cats that need to be adopted. So I told Ron, I said, we gotta go back and save this kitten under the dumpster. We couldn't get it. So he said, well, let's go to PetSmart. And they were these 2, they're friends, but they acted like brothers. And so we couldn't separate them, so we got them. And then this guy who was trying to help us capture the dumpster cat caught the dumpster cat and then called me. And I'm like, my husband's highly allergic to cats. And I'm like, I can only do 3 on him. So I convinced Colleen Whitlock to take the dumpster kitty, and she named him Charlie, and she's just in love. So we saved 3 kittens all on July 4th weekend. It was fantastic. So that made me happy.
Anyway, I'd like to mention something. Do you know, everyone, that Cindy has a new pet animal that she's trying to domesticate?
It left.
Right.
What is it?
I had a bear drop by the other night, my open bedroom window after it snacked on the garbage. But yeah, I'll share the videos with you. If you're my friend on Facebook, you can go watch them there.
Oh.
It was,
I will.
Did you name your bear?
huh?
Did you name your bear?
I did not. I don't want him to.
I know. I have a skunk that keeps visiting and leaving a trace almost every morning. Like the coolest part of the morning when you want all your windows open. And what am I going to do about that little bugger?
Funny.
Okay, let's see what we've got here. Let's see, how about
Progress.
item 2? Are we ready for item 2 yet?
Yes. So item 2 is you typically do board member trainings in every year. And one of the big ones is the new board member training. And that will be probably something we want to offer this year since we have a pretty big election in November with seats being taken in December. And then the other one will be a Brown Act training that's specific to Brown Act. The new board training, we usually have Byron come in and a few other people do that. And then the Brown Act training, I usually have Scott come in and do that one, and people have liked Scott coming in to do that one as well. He usually raffles off King's tickets, but I don't know how that will go this year. You've offered board trainings in the past around things such as discipline, which Alternatives to Discipline was actually one of the better attended ones this past year. There are a lot of topics we can offer, and I think we were going to do one in the spring, which was like innovative ideas and best practices, and we wanted to have a sharing session. And as you know, we weren't able to do that one. So I wanted to get your thoughts on scheduling the board member trainings, keeping in mind that some of these will have to possibly be virtual. And if you want to hold off on offering them until the spring to see how things go, with a hope that they're virtual. And so that's what this topic is.
I know for next March, CCBE will be holding, it was canceled this last spring, which was the advanced board training. So this coming year should be the new board member training. So for our new county board members, we will have that in March, and it's hard to say if it's going to be in person or virtual, but that will also be an option for county board members.
Any further discussion on this?
I'd almost like to hold off till spring. Y'all know I'm not a fan of the Zoom meeting. So I just think it's something networking wise, it's a lot more effective in person. So if we're going to go to the time, trouble, and expense to actually offer it, I'd like to see them, hopefully together in person. So my thoughts.
This is Judy. I appreciate Juliana and Cindy meeting with me on a sort of a one-to-one, and it's been really good that way. But I would look forward, I think, to something in the spring that person and not a Zoom. But I feel very comfortable as a new member being able to just call up anybody and appreciated setting in on the committee meeting this morning, which was very helpful, and just wherever I can glean bits of information is good.
Our Brown Act training, a lot of our district secretaries and our CBOs rely upon that as well as their training. The board's new board members are seated in December's meeting. And then they have their first meeting in January. Would you want to possibly, I would encourage you to do a Brown Act training. A 45-minute Brown Act training. I can get Scott to make it as interesting as possible, but also just, this is the thing, these are the things you need to know as a board member. Especially around like closed session items, that things that don't happen very often, but the things that get you in the kind of the gotcha moments. And so, especially around things like interdistrict appeals, in the relationship between the district and the county boards, and potentially around just having things like serial meetings, the texting that happens, right? I've had to talk to a couple of my staff members about, don't ever send things to the board on their to line, always send a blind copy, because sometimes people just reply all and they just don't even think about that they might be starting a conversation. I said that's how you avoid it. You send blind copy, and then that way they only reply to you, and you're protecting them. That's your job, is to protect them from these inadvertent things. Because I have never, I won't say never, I have very infrequently seen anybody that got caught with a Brown Act violation doing it deliberately. It's always been an accident or an oversight, or I didn't even think that, I was just doing that. And so we could offer a very short Brown Act training, like the first week back from January, because most of the boards do their board meetings the second and third weeks of January. That way you've met your obligation in that, because we've always said we will provide Brown Act training. Your secretaries and your CBOs and actually we get a lot of superintendents that are new that like to attend that. You've got that for 45 minutes. And then we hold off.
Question I kept real quick. Kath, what about this new world of online meetings? Does something have to occur before to prevent any, if we do happen to be remote in the fall? Should the school boards have a refresher, make sure they don't trip on themselves doing Zoom meetings?
Well, I hope that they have all consulted with their attorneys right now about Zoom meetings.
All right. Hope.
Oh, we lost Cindy. She was getting unstable. I saw that. Her connection was unstable.
She's back.
Oh, she's back. Oh, Brian. Oh, you're made co-host.
I noticed I was a co-host before. I don't know why.
Maybe
Anyway.
I made you a co-host. Yeah, accidentally. Oh.
Oh, now Brian is the co-host.
Yes.
Kathy, I
Probably when you came
think
in.
it's a great idea. Having that Brown Act for 45 minutes the first week of January, I think using Scott is a great idea. I really enjoy hearing what he has to say. I especially like doing the Brown Act because there are a lot of books, things about the Brown Act that board members can go to, but I think it might give us a sense of how many people are willing to attend a virtual workshop, and that maybe in the future we may end up doing some kind of hybrid in person and virtual, so that we might get more people attending. So it might be kind of a really good indication of where we can go in the future too, to just to be able to reach out to more board members. I think that I was going to tell Casey, I think that most of the schools in my district seem to have it down pretty well. I had to remind one school district that, which I did very nicely in the chat part, saying that, when you take a vote, you need to do a roll call vote. And they're like, oh yeah. I mean, it's just, sometimes it's just reminding little things. I just said, I just don't want you to get in trouble later and have to redo anything. And so they were really appreciative about that. I know that there is a county office in our region that can't figure out how to do a Zoom meeting. And so they're only doing their county board meeting by phone.
Huh.
Got to be backwards. I'm sorry.
I agree, but that's how they do it. They just only do it by phone.
Hey, Dawn can do it. Anybody can do it.
Did you notice I'm going incognito today? I have no picture.
All right, Dawn.
I'm trying to hide myself from the rest of you, and I hope you appreciate it.
You need to get an avatar, Dawn, so we can see what your cartoon character looks like.
Hey, I'm looking okay for an old guy. Fine.
Well, I think having a Brown Act class in January is an excellent idea. I would suspect that for many of us, this doing business virtually is a whole new world. And I'm sure that there are questions and things that come up that, we don't know from the I think it's a very appropriate time to have it.
And then just hold off on the rest of the trainings until we go a little bit further into the year and then make a determination.
Yeah, I like the idea of doing it early in January, February. I won't be on the board at that time. This is my last term, so it's up to you guys to carry on with that. So.
Okay, well, I'll select a date in January, work with Scott on that one, and then make a determination of what works then for everybody. And then hopefully we'll know more about CSBA at that point. I do have a meeting with the college at 10:30, but we do have time for our last one. If you want to move on to item 3.
Yep, item 3.
Okay.
The board will discuss board meeting structure. That's what we're going to be doing now, and effective online board meeting format.
Right. So we just kind of fell into doing Zoom, and we never had a real discussion on norms. And this is our opportunity to visit that again before our August meeting. And one of the things that I will do is if we have a committee meeting before our board meeting, I will use the same Zoom information so that you can just stay on the same call, and then that way you don't have to log out and come in, especially if you go a couple minutes over. So I'll correct that piece of it. But I wanted to give you an opportunity because we talked about an agenda change last time. We ended up not doing it, and so that one was about introduction of guests. If you want to temporarily remove that as one of the items. So this is your chance to talk about your structure of Zoom meetings and what you would like to see changed.
Okay, any board comments on this? Hey, I just have a couple suggestions though for the rest of these virtual meetings, and this is just repeating kind of what I said earlier. All actions will require a roll call vote. That's clean and very nice, and it helps Kelly. Okay, also comments from the board. I think if it's virtual, it's really nice if we could do it in some sort of an order. And the reason for that is that way we don't get one person butting in, another person butting in, that kind of thing. But I want your view on that also, please.
Well, Don, I don't mind going in order, but I think that I don't think it should be like a rule, because I think that sometimes, like say you asked me to go first, but then Rose might say something and then I want to question that or add a comment. I want to be able to do that.
That's smart, because you have to respond. That makes sense.
Yes.
Maybe the response is
because our board's back and forth.
Yes.
Oftentimes makes us really come up with a great decision to move
Right.
forward on something.
I agree.
And I don't mind having some kind of order, but I want to be able to have some flexibility.
What I was thinking is that, so let's say it comes to you and you have some brilliant idea and people want to respond to it or whatever's going on. I think then we need to allow the response at that time, but otherwise then just go right down the line and say, okay, fine. And once that's dead, so to speak, and finished, then let's go to the next board member and see if they have any comment. If they don't, we just pass it down. But I think we ought to have open response. Any comments? Casey, you got comments all over the place. Come on.
No, I'm just listening. Sorry, I got FedEx delivery. I like it. I think it's smart. Juliana, makes sense.
Well, thank you. I'll vote for you. It's okay.
Would you like to eliminate introduction of guests temporarily? I know Dawn and Cindy, you were thinking at the last, even though we didn't do that, we can make that change if you wanted to.
Virtually, I think we can do that.
So, but what if we have guests who are on the call?
Well, if there's no guests, we can waive it, right?
Right. I mean,
right,
we just.
I think it was the complexity of introducing the guests.
So do we have
Yeah,
do we have to have that on our agenda?
No.
No, that's just something that we have chosen to do.
Right.
Oh, okay. Because every board meeting I go to, they have an introduction of guests. So I guess it's just kind of a norm for
Yeah.
agendas.
It's funny. If I
I just think,
got here, this was completely different. Like Sonora, we just said, welcome everybody. We didn't go around the room and have everyone talk. I mean, it does take up 5-10 minutes of every meeting.
And that's right, because Casey and I both chaired that board. at
Yeah.
one time. Yeah, and it was clean. Worked
But you always
fine.
leave it open because you have to leave it open. Anyone wants to bring something up, right? You gotta leave that section in, but
Right,
I don't say, hey, Brian, introduce yourself,
right.
which we don't mind, Brian. Thank you.
My name is Brian Thomas.
Did we lose Cindy again?
Cindy Lou Who.
I think her internet's going kind of in and out.
So do we want to eliminate introduction of guests?
I say we eliminate it unless it's needed, right? It's optional. We have a lot of guests that wants to talk. Sure. If not, we just move on.
Because maybe someone does want to introduce themselves, but yeah, I'm with Casey.
So,
Yep.
but do you
So
want do you want it on the agenda?
Doesn't it have to be on the, if
Go
you're
ahead.
good either way or one or the other, if you're going to have somebody introduced, doesn't it have to be on the agenda?
Yes.
Oh, then, yeah.
So I mean, if you're gonna have it, you're giving. I mean, you have to give people the option of not introducing themselves. They don't have to introduce themselves. A lot of boards don't do introduction of guests. So, but that was what was a comment was made, is that it gets a little messy when we have a large group. You can make an amendment to the depending on where we have it, an amendment to the agenda before you approve it, to eliminate it if you want. You just have to remember to do that.
You know, what would happen then if you had a significant person in the audience that's well-known and well-respected and whatnot? For instance, okay, the governor decides to come to one of our meetings, which wouldn't happen probably, but let's just say that. Okay, you could welcome everybody and then say we have a special guest today or tonight or so on. Could do that.
Make them talk at public comment. Make them wait in line.
Yeah.
I guess I still like the introduction of guests because I like to see who's in the audience, you know, if it's somebody that I'm not familiar with, especially from the office.
Okay.
I mean, I'll do what the board pleases, but the pleasure of the board, but I kind of like having that. And if there's nobody there, there's just nobody there. I mean,
All right. I only have 2 minutes before I have to go to my last call. I'm so sorry. It's about the Promise Scholarship. They want to try and add some more students, and they wanted to talk to me about it before their meeting today.
Question real quick to the group. Doesn't filing open today for the fall elections? November?
oh,
Today filing is our first day of filing, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I think it is today.
Okay.
thank you for.
I'll send out the reminders for everybody. My last question is, do you want to have it as a norm that if you're not speaking, you mute yourself? Or sometimes we help mute you. And then the other one, what do you want to do about video?
We need.
Video comments, please.
I think video should be on. I say as I come in and out of this meeting, my apologies. I don't know. I like to see your faces, and then there's the whole transparency issue as well.
I agree.
I like to see the video.
Yeah, I like the video. I mean, if you got to turn it off because something's going on in the background for distraction, then turn it off for a minute.
Okay.
Yeah,
But
but I'm all in favor.
So for the most part, picture video on. Okay.
Mhm.
Yes.
We get to
I'm
see
here.
it.
Oh,
Okay.
I decided to show up for the meeting late. It's okay.
Okay. So if there is nothing else, should we adjourn the meeting? And we'll meet again on August 10th, if that's up to Donald. Don? You pick
Okay,
Donald.
yep, I'll do that. Let's go for it. Okay, the time and place, next meeting, regular board meeting, August 10th, 2020, at 4 p.m. Video conference only. That's the announcement. And anything else?
That's it.
Okay. Okay, with that in mind,
Guys, tomorrow.
we have, and if you want to vote on adjournment, that's fine. If you want to stay here, that's okay too. So,
I move that
anyway,
we adjourn.
yeah, yeah, okay. So, roll call vote,
I need a second. Unless somebody.
Okay.
second,
Casey? Okay. Okay, roll call. Nick,
Yes.
Juliana,
Yes.
Casey,
Yes, ma'am.
Don,
yes.
Cindy,
Yes.
Rose,
Yes.
and Judy.
Yes.
Great. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Bye.
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 Bye-bye.